Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the monastery, the open bar of the internet, the world's greatest shit show, and the place where we, the good brothers and sisters of this most holy of temples, seek enlightenment through the drunkest, craziest, and most batshit ways possible. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have a returning good brother to the temple, coming to us from the wild and wonderful world of the Fragged universe. Now coming back to us with Fragged Empire's Ragtag spinoff, the one and only Wade Dyer. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you going?
I'm doing pretty good. Uh, I'm just counting down the days until summer ends, so I don't have to worry about overheating as much. Yeah, I'm
Well,
not.
we're in the depths of winter here, in the land down under.
Yeah. Um, I've I've had to add, because of that recent thing that happened with Australia's central time zone. I've had to add the jokes that even the clocks in Australia are trying to kill everybody. Well, that because I guess the magpies weren't doing enough of a job annoying everyone. Oh, which yes, I've been made aware, and I'm pretty sure during swooping season there's probably some places where you're legally mandated to wear a helmet if you're biking.
I don't know if it's legally, but if you don't want to get hit in the head, then definitely a good idea. My poor wife who is a much more jittery disposition than me, absolutely hates it. So she goes full on crazy with a mask on the helmet, and like you get like little ties and stuff like that to like put spike bits on your helmet. It's worth it. It's worth it. It stops them. They're a real pain if you don't do it.
Well, yeah, because you get hit once, you're gonna keep getting hit every year.
And hit by multiple ones, and while you're riding on the road, it's, yeah.
Mhm.
And they don't bother the lucky walkers so much. It's the riders they go for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now this particular project, Fragged Empire Ragtag.
Yep.
Um, if I've got it right, this is intended to be a simpler variant of the Fragged Empire universe that's far more beer and pretzels than Fragged Empire proper. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. No. Yep. That's a pretty accurate take on it. Ragtag basically sits occupying two spots within the Fragged ecosystem. One is, a rules light, much more sort of fun and punchy, lighter, more dramatic narrative theatre of the mind type rule system, which I've got to say, I know people like, oh yes, there's a bunch of those. I've never not made a classic fragged rule system for a long, long, long time. So this is my first go at an alternate rule system since I've been doing this. So hopefully it's received well, and I had a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
The second place that it occupies is I like to do my big fancy books. Big hardcover, like Fragged Empire 2, and I'm working on Frag Kingdom 2 at the moment, big and expensive, high render artwork in it. The alternate thing I like to do are these sort of smaller, digital only, much more artistic, creative, looser projects, and Ragtag fits into that as well. It's me having fun and getting the creative juices going and doing stuff different. I did a lot of lot of the art myself, and yeah.
Yeah, I can certainly get that. And I think one of the interesting parts with this uh, is that this is a very different visual style in that same universe. One
hmm
that, in a roundabout way, kind of reminds me of stuff like Slay Industries and 2000 AD. And is that a coincidence? Is that a case of a coincidence, or was stuff like 2000 AD and the like a bit of an influence on the design?
Um, I'm not actually familiar with those two. I think I've heard of Slay Industries before, but it's
Have you heard of Judge Dredd?
Oh yes, I know of Judge Dredd. Yeah, okay, that kind of old comic book style. Yeah, I would say that definitely features in there a lot. Yeah. When I was doing the art, so I initially did all the art myself, and I sat down with my tablet and my pen, and I was looking at lots of different art styles, and a lot of that was some of the old comic book stuff, especially some of the old French comics
Mobius.
and stuff. Yeah, Mobius is classic. Love Mobius.
Mhm.
And a lot of I did that to sort of really sort of mix things up in my own head. But then I've also slipped in stuff like there's some pixel art sort of stuff in there as well,
Yeah.
and there's a few different styles. Um, but then to cap it off, though, I did commission some other much more professional and refined artists to do like my front cover and my character
Yeah.
sheet and stuff like that. So, just sort of like you want the beautiful capping off sort
I
of
do
thing.
remember when you were teasing this, in your different social medias and on the Discord. You had brought up Mork Borg as another major influence.
Yeah. So I normally am a person that's very apprehensive to ever compare my RPG projects to other RPGs. Like when people ask me, "Oh, what's classic Fragged Empire like?" and they'll say, "Is it like Pathfinder? Is it like D&D?" I always struggle to answer that, but I think with Ragtag, I I kind of know where I was influenced from, and I got my influences very heavily from the OSR movement, Mothership, and Morkborg.
Mhm.
I just thought these are some really innovative and fun stuff is going on within these sort of systems that I really quite liked. And I think that was a lot of it I wanted to do Ragtag because it was just sort of so different to what I'm normally doing. These real tight, crunchier systems with the maths is super important and there's a bunch of modifiers. Whereas this is much more about the vibe.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to exactly copy one of those systems. I didn't want to make this Fragged Empire Morkborg or Fragged Empire Mothership or something like that. I love to create my own things, so I'm kind of putting my own spin on stuff and trying to see where I can. I like to push the medium. I don't want to just copy. I love to celebrate what's great out there, but I always like to do something a little bit new and different as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Mm.
And speaking of new and different, one of the big things that is certainly a departure from past works in your gamography up until this point is up until this point you've used primarily a D6 based system, uh,
Mm.
which I've talked to you about that in the past. That it's largely owed to some of your big inspirations, especially stuff like the hero system. But
Mm-hmm.
for this, you're using the full range of polyhedrals.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
what gave you the idea to go in that route? Was it just to further separate it from the other games in the Frag universe?
So a few things. So definitely, I think separating. I think I really wanted Ragtag to not be just some cut down version of the core Fragged experience. I didn't want that. Was what I wanted to do something different because I want something that an existing Fragged player might also want to jump in and do, and to feel like, oh, this is new.
Hmm.
You know. And I thought, okay, I'm in a new core resolution system completely, and so I started going through a lot of different ideas in my head, and I thought, you know what, it needs to be straightforward. I really don't like the whole percentile and the D20 for everything. I knew I didn't want to do that. So I thought, you know what? Okay, average, and I settled on this idea that it's not a new idea. Other systems have done this. Like a skill could start off as a D4, then you upgrade it, it becomes a D6, and then it becomes a D8,
Hmm.
D10, D12, D20. We've all done that before. Like we've seen that a few times, and I thought this is a good fit for what I want. Because it's new. The other part I liked it for is it's very visual, and and because of something I'm going for Ragtag is I want something to be a bit of a feast for the eyes. I want that vibe, and I want it to look sort of fun and exciting. And the strange sort of dice, they look cool on the character sheet, the little icons and the shapes. It feels nice. And then I combine that with a system called my drama dice system, which we can go into later if you want to sort of think of some sort of interesting maths that I can do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know if you'd like me to explain the drama dice system as well. Or my
Yeah,
yeah.
I think one of the before I get to that, one of the things I did want to get into is since it's largely based on die sizes with the combination of the of your attributes which are capped off, and then the skill which has a different range. Um, is there some sort of effect that can happen if one or more of the die rolls their minimum or maximum?
So normally with a roll, there's nothing that triggers on a minute or a maximum of a singular roll. To make a raw skill roll, so let's say I'm making a stealth roll. I roll my die. That's a pretty safe roll. Like it's you roll a 4+. Generally, you're going to succeed. If you fail, something bad's gonna happen. You're either going to take some bodies, stress damage, or maybe one of the negative plot dice is going to trigger every time you fail a roll. But rolling a 1 or a maximum is not going to trigger it. But to pair that with your drama dice, when you activate your drama dice, that's when critical successes and critical failures come into. That is you choosing to roll another die alongside that die, and you pick the one from the list, okay? And they go from there's a set of 6 positive and 6 negatives. And they're like, for example, lucky, teamwork, reckless, wounded, unsettled, overconfident, sacrifice. And you roll the 2 dice together, and if you roll a double, doesn't matter what double that is, it counts as a critical success. So if you roll 2 twos, even though you didn't roll a 4+, still counts as a success. You either deal some extra damage, you get a bonus narrative consequence, and if either of the die is a 1, that's a critical failure. And that's kind of, because in this system there's no GM rolling, it's all player rolling. When a player decides to add a drama die to their roll, they are saying this scene, this moment has more to it. It's supposed to be a more dramatic moment. And it's actually your use of those drama dice. You can only use each one once until all 12 are used, and then you reset. Yeah, so in a way, you're kind of picking roles. This is important. I really want to succeed this one. If I fail this one, it can make the scene more fun or interesting, or I'm just to kind of embrace it. So you take a negative drama die. You can also get a little bit clever, because you know that if you're using pairing a D4 with a D12, the chances of a double is almost non-existent. But if you pair 2 D4s together, critical success is much more likely, but also more likely to get a critical fail. There's a little bit of detailing in there as well.
All right. So, given that is it a case where no matter what you're rolling one die period, you're not rolling if say you've got culture at D6 and art and history at D12. If you're rolling art and history, you'd roll D12, not D6 and D12 in that case.
Yep, you just roll the D12. So if you got one of your specializations, so culture kind of covers a broad category, and that can go up to D8 quality. But then if you got one of the specializations, art, history, customs, language, that starts as a higher die, but much more narrow in terms of its subject matter, what it covers.
Yeah. Now, given that, I think one of the big things I wanted to ask when it comes to the drama dice itself is it a case where you said only the players are rolling, the GM doesn't roll. So is it a case where the player is going to have to pick which of the positive or negative drama die they pick?
Yes, yep. So the player is responsible. They can pick the one they got, and the player is responsible to justify their choice. So of course the GM can always say, they can always make suggestions. They can say, that doesn't justify that, Um, so they still get to do that, but it's up to the player. The player's got to carry some of the narrative weight on their own shoulders to problem solve their character, and how they're approaching things, and then sell that idea to the GM.
I can get that. Now, given that, since a lot of games are going to have situational modifiers, you're depending on situation, your +2, your -2, your bonus or die, your penalty, or the like. Is there going to be something akin to that situational setup with the die rolling for Ragtag?
Yeah, so the general idea is that a roll requires a 4+. If a roll would be easier than that, then don't roll at all, just use game time. But the GM does have some tools to alter the situation, so they can increase the difficulty, to 4, 5, or 6. And then players, depending on their actions, can either get can get a bonus. So if you're behind cover, you might get +1 to your defense. If you're ambushing an opponent, you might get +1 to your attack roll.
Now, bringing this into combat, the combat with Fragged Empire as it is certainly not the most friendly to people who the dice gods don't care for. It is already a very violent affair. One where unless you know how to utilize your environment properly, you're going to be put in the dirt very easily.
It's a tactical game. Fragged Empire, classic Fragged Empire, is very much a tactical game. It embraces that. Yeah.
I think the question when it comes to bringing that into Ragtag is, how do you maintain that same sense of tactics, that same sense of threat in a simplified setup as you have here?
The short answer is I kind of don't, in a way, because I'm not trying to mimic that same experience. In Ragtag, it's a very different way as to how you do fights. So Ragtag is a lot more of a deadly game, and you might come up against some opponents. You're like, okay, we've got the right tools to take out this particular foe, and then other ones you might look. We don't have any of the tools to take out this foe, so we need to run. So the way that attack rolls work in Ragtag is your weapon determines what type of defense you target. So all characters have 6 types of defense. So absorb, deflect, dodge, health, resolve, or tactics. And your weapon will target one of those. So guns just can't target absorb. Absorb is like armor. It's a basic one. But you might run up against a foe that is basically immune on at least 1 or 2 of those defense stats. And if you don't have the weapon to target their weak stats, then you are expected to run. And players are expected to have a few different weapons on them and to get quite creative in how they approach monsters. To try and think of justification for one of your other skill rolls to use instead of your shooting them if you just can't shoot the opponent. Use your environment, stuff like that. It's much more creatively problem solving, which I guess is the same sort of thing as tactics. So you might think of tactics as sort of like mathematical or spatial sort of problem, whereas Ragtag is much more like it's using interesting tools, and how do I use these tools in my environment to tackle my foe, or should I tackle them? How do I know when to fight, when to run, and stuff like that?
I can certainly get that. Now, with that in mind, I think one of the other interesting things that you have here is the setup with the different races you already have with the Fragged universe, along with a vocation setup, which I think you do tie into how the vocations are related to the stress mechanic that you got here.
Yeah, so the way that you make a character is that you select one of the. First thing is to do is you select a species and a subculture.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one choice. So, for example, each of the species have three examples subcultures. So, or let's just pick the
Let's go with Legion.
we'll go Legion. Okay, so Legion have Auxilia, Exilia, and Nomad. So Auxilia means you work for the Legion government, like a mercenary. Exilia means you are an outcast or someone who has, led official command, and Nomad is you're a Legion who lives out in the wild. So firstly, you'd select your subculture. So let's say we go Legion Exilia, so I'm an outcast,
Mm-hmm.
and then you select a vocation. And your vocation is either Ace, Boffin, Merc, Parasite, Space Wizard, or Technician. Um, and then you combine those together, and they will give you your starting skills, plus you'll be able to select one to also upgrade,
Mm-hmm.
your starting items, possibly a minor ability, and then you roll for a random ability. And this random ability is a D12, and it's a list that's combined from your subculture and your vocation. So 1 to 8 is going to give you an ability from your subculture, and 9 to 12 is going to give you something um, off your vocation. So let's say I made my character, I roll for a random ability, and I'm going to start with, I roll a 9, I get Winds of Power, which is from my Space Wizard. So
Mm-hmm.
once per session, I can re-roll a die that was used with an arcane skill roll. Um, and then that's your character. And I found the subcultures were a very interesting thing to flesh out because I think that's one of Fragg's strongest things. Its strongest thing is its species and their cultures and their subcultures. And then I thought that was worth adding a little bit, adding in a bit of detail in Ragtag, bit of fun.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do find it interesting that in the playtest doc, the sample mission that you have there has a very room to room setup. It
Mm-hmm.
does make me wonder if the idea of doing this in a kind of hex crawl has been something that's been considered.
Yeah, I have a complicated relationship with pre-made adventures. The pre-made adventure that I've actually got in the back of my ragtag book, I've rewritten that thing about 3 times, and I actually ended up settling on a much more cut down version. Um, and Ragtag makes use of a lot of rolling tables, so like you get random loot
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. And when you suffer too much body or stress damage, you roll on the aptly named Fragged table to see whether you die or you retire, or maybe you spring back even stronger than ever. And so there's a lot of that randomness in it, and I decided to embrace that with the adventure. Whereas you're not even the GM knows what's going to happen in a way. Like a GM has some vague ideas, some sort of polls, but every time you go into a new room, you're also you're rolling to see, okay, well, how is this? What's in the room? And what's the connecting point between the room? And part of this is not just to create a very much more fun sort of procedural discovery sort of for the players, but also for the GM. Because in a game where the GM is not rolling, um, and you want to create a bunch of fun things for the GM to also be improving off and to be discovering alongside the players. And I think that's the sort of thing that I wanted from from Ragtag. Like I want that the players and the GM are sort of unlocking it together and then coming up with stuff, justifications, and sort of
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I ended up asking is the premise with Ragtag is people going into these derelict ships to try and get some loot and get some trouble, sometimes both.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
I felt that that is a perfect setup for that sort of um random ship encounters or ship events kind of thing.
The quintessential game is you're a bunch of mercs, you drop into a ghost ship, and you find out what
Yeah.
nerd's going on and seeing what you can find in there to loot and shoot and stuff
I
like
just
that.
realized what I was leaning into with that analogy.
Mhm.
Did you ever play the Space Hulk board game back in the day?
Oh man, yeah. I played a bunch of, and I played the remake of it as well, actually.
Yeah, the one where the one where they decided to only make a handful just so that they could jack up the price because GW gonna GW.
GW has always been GWing.
Yeah, because the rest of the world didn't want to, so someone had to. I guess is how they'd put it. But I might be thinking of this because of the way that the Sactus in the playtest is laid out. But I feel like that is a perfect setup to have that kind of room to room randomization. In the same way that you have the section by section approach in something like Space Hulk.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's so for those who like, just listening in, the map is effectively in the sample adventure is a bunch of boxes.
mhm.
It doesn't describe the exact layout of the ship. Like there's some artwork of the ships, you have a general gist of its arrangement, but the exact shape of each room is not defined or anything like that. Yeah, it's just a bunch of boxes with a description and then some random tables on what they're
Yeah, I've seen
very, very
Mhm.
trimmed down.
I've seen Alex T do a similar thing with his Rift Breakers game. It in that one it's a bit broader, and I've also seen a setup not too dissimilar to this with some of the crawl spaces that are seen in Sword World, which is
Mm-hmm.
a whole other beast. Sword World's one of the larger TTRPGs that's homegrown in Japan. I did a whole actual play of that not too long ago.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
But now, in addition, there's the concept of plot dice, which in the back you had written it as countdown to danger or overcoming an obstacle. In that
Mm-hmm.
regard, would plot dice be similar to like the clock system that's used in Blades in the Dark?
Very much so. Yeah. So the plot dice are effectively just a way for it's kind of just giving the GMs just a tool for mechanically tracking stuff.
Hmm.
But also like NPCs each have plot dice until they're defeated. Maybe they have 3 or 4, and you shoot them and they go down. It could be hit points, or it could be until they run away, or something like that. Um, and yeah, very Blades in the Darkish. Yeah.
Hmm.
Even I haven't actually played Blade in the Dark, but it's very much like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you may not have, but you've seen that clock mechanic all over the place. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of that when you're creating a system, you kind of don't want everything to be completely original. I'm more than happy to sort of take stuff
Yeah,
that works well and it fits exactly what I want in this system, and that did it. And so I'm like, yeah.
because I was 50-50 between whether or not I should invoke the clock system there or the degrading die mechanic that the Black Hack has used.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like how it handles ammo die instead of regular ammo.
Mm-hmm.
The for say for a ranged weapon, it'd be a case where every time you use it, or every time you reload, you'd use the um die, and if you roll the lowest amount, you decrease the size of the die by 1, and when you finally do that with a D4, you run out.
Right.
Uh,
That's a clever idea. I like that. Yeah. I've gone for a pretty straightforward ammo system with mine, where it's a straight ammo count.
mhm.
Yeah.
But but that particular concept has been used in things like countdowns and other forms. That
Yeah,
that was just an
I think
example.
Yeah, I think the system that Blades in the Dark came up to, they effectively codified and popularized a GM tracking method that has sort of actually been around for a long time, and lots of different ways and slight iterations. And I think they kind of, and when they wrote it down, everyone went, "Aha, this is great." This describes that thing that I was kind of already three quarters using, and this is that. Oh, it's a bit like that other system that someone else has used, but more fleshed out. And I thought, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it works well.
Yeah. Now, with that in mind, one of the things I saw when I looked into combat is the idea of the big action, which you
Mm-hmm.
made a point of emphasizing by having the big being bigger font.
Yeah, that's right. So it's just it's sort of something. So in a normal fight, uh, the attacker goes first, but it might be like players act, and then the NPCs act, and then the players act, and then the NPCs act. A big action is the GM can declare a big action, which is effectively usually an attack roll on all players all at once. So rather than like let's say the monster was sort of swiping at one player at a time, then they might do a big roar. So everybody's got to make their resolve defense roll at the table all at once. And then after the GM has declared that big action, then he doesn't get to attack, or NPCs don't get to perform an action until all players have then performed their action. And it's mostly a way of shifting up the tempo of of the table. Uh, as a sort of, okay, we're going back and forth, back and forth. Okay, shift, everything changes, the flow feels different, everyone wakes up, everyone gets excited because they're all rolling all at once, and if they all went really bad with their rolls, they're like, oh no, that sort of wrecks us, or maybe they went well, and then they're like, now the NPCs don't get to act until we've all acted, and so then the players then get that sense of power rush, following the GM's power rush. Yeah.
Now, given that, and given the way you have it set up, um, would it be possible with a little bit of work for this to be run GM-less?
Yeah, so I think one of my players actually, one of my people on my Discord asked me about that. And I'll be straight up, I've never played a single player RPG before. I've done single player board games, but not single player RPGs. I think Ragtag, with a tiny, tiny amount of work, would so work as like a solo RPG.
Well,
Because there's so many random tables there, there's no GM rolling, it's all player rolling. Yeah, it could totally work.
well, I should clarify. I did not mean when I said GM-less. I did not necessarily mean solo.
Yes.
There are
So,
there are games that are GM-less, like say let's see what is why is the name escaping me right when I need it? But
that's right. So I totally got ahead of myself just because somebody asked me about that yesterday, and so I think it was on the top of my mind.
yeah.
Um,
I've talked
yeah,
about Emberland in the past. That can be run GM-less because of its AI setup. I was curious if you think that with a little bit of wiggling about, that Ragtag could be run GM-less and just have a group of players.
Yeah, I think that could work. I mean, you just need to set up some sort of AI system. All you do is just say something like, okay, each player gets attacked clockwise around the table, during a fight. Everybody who's performing a skill roll, maybe everyone makes a skill roll clockwise around the table, something like that.
Yeah.
And then maybe they just, maybe the person to your left, to your right can narratively do a little fill in if need be or something like that. I think if anybody's got any experience with any system like that, they could easily whip up a one-page set of rules and that would work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like the example, the game I was thinking of earlier was Mystic Imperium. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to AI set systems, which one of the ones that instantly comes to mind is the AI hex grid that all NPCs have in Emberwind. All
Mm-hmm.
NPCs when it comes to actual combat have it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's usually just a die roll that determines a set of actions from the center hex outward, and higher
Yeah.
tier monsters have a larger amount of hexes in a circle, so you kind of have a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a path that can be gone down.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that is certainly one possibility. Uh, I'd say it's a bit more dynamic than rolling one die and then checking a table, for instance.
Yeah, I would say that's way more dynamic than what I have in my mind. But yeah, I think if I was going to do something like that, I'd want someone who's sort of much more familiar with those sort of things
Yeah.
to come up with something than me. Yeah,
Hmm.
but
Now,
I think ragtag could work quite well,
yeah.
definitely.
Um, and I do find it interesting as well that you set up a third party license, even having the compatible with ragtag thing at the on the backer kit. I keep wanting to say Kickstarter
Yeah,
just out of habit, but
I know. I get the same thing. Yep, yep. Yeah. So I've long wanted to set up a third party license for my main Fragged Empire line. Um, I think I've always just felt quite nervous because Fragged Empire is just it's just a very very valuable IP to me, and um, I never quite got to the spot where I felt like the community was large enough to really warrant something like a third party for it. But I felt Ragtag being a smaller project, um, and something really much easier for other people to also riff on. I thought it was something good, so I set up a really simple third party license, and I kind of, this is part of my whole, this is one of my smaller, more experimental projects. Is part of it is I want to see if I can get any traction. I've made it very generous with my third party license. It's effectively, no royalties, nothing, just slap the little logo on there so people know it's branded for me and go for it. You can do whatever you want. Make something free, make something you want to sell. And I kind of want to just see if that happens. Because I think it's all good to have a third party license, but is it really of much value if nobody's actually using it? And so I think it's one part to create it, which I've done. Now is going to come the second part. Is it going to be used? And if it is used, I will give it more support. And if it's well used, then I'm going to bring that over to my other Fragged Empire line. Because I also want a little experience with it. Like I want to see what it's like to be a creator, to actually moderate other people creating stuff within, to attach to what you've made. And once I've got that under my belt, I feel like I could create something not just robust in terms of protecting me from my Fragged Empire line, but also something that is really community focused, community usable. Um, yeah, by people.
hmm I I can certainly see that, and I'm pretty sure you'd find it interesting if somebody does a full on hack of what Ragtag has into whole other avenues you haven't considered yet.
I'd love it. I'd be so over the moon if someone grabbed Ragtag and they thought it was worthy enough to go and make some sort of riff on it. I'd be so excited. Like that would make me, one of the things that I love the most as a creator is when people tell me I ran such and such a campaign, or I GM'd and it went amazing, or I made a player and it was so much fun, or you know, to be able to add to that list, oh, I'm a budding creator and I decided to make a ragtag, set in this other setting or this other. Like, I don't even care if it's something off like a movie or a computer game. They make a free package for. I'd be over the moon. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm not saying that I'm going to be the one to do that yet, but that sort of creativity I feel is a key part of the TTRPG identity.
Mm, yep, yep. The way I describe it is, and this is my saying, I've used it a lot, is my job as a creator is to create logs for other people's creative fire. And primarily that's for players and GMs. I would love to also make that for budding creators as well.
Hmm. Um, I've and the, an analogy that I've used personally is that of the blue bucket of Legos.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had the blue bucket of Legos, and everybody had done some sort of freestyling with that blue bucket. Unless you had Mega Blocks as a kid, or bastards. Nobody likes Mega Blocks, but it's in that same vein, and that's I've also used the phrase nobody plays Uno as written, because even if somebody thinks that they're not going to house rule a game, they are going to. It is
Yep.
only a matter of time.
Yep.
Uh, and I'm pretty sure even in your own playtests, you've done your fair share of house ruling or house rules that became official rules.
Yeah, I have a weird one on that one, so I have to hold myself back from house ruling because I'm like, well, it's not really playtesting it if I'm house ruling it, you know. So I definitely do that. If I change it for my personal game, it's getting changed in the book.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I will if I ever put out anything officially under my own IPs, I'm gonna have that house rule even in my own playtest and simply go. This is just what made it the most sense to me. It might not make as much sense to you. In which case, change it
Mm.
because Rule Zero is a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, as well as the corollary to Rule Zero, don't be a monos. Uh, I have way too many international friends, so I end up taking terms that I should not be using, given my location, and integrating them anyways, because who's gonna stop me? Uh, there's no there's no such thing as a language police, and even if there were, it'd be a case of get a warrant.
Oh my goodness.
Uh,
If you, I swear though, if you poke your head on the internet, someone's going to try and police you.
oh,
That's
they're gonna
internet.
they're gonna try to, and then they're gonna get laughed at like everybody else. And then I'll put their post up on a wall, and I'll call that the wall of shame. Because there's that quote that's attributed to Mark Twain about how against the assault of laughter nothing can stand. So when people want to try and police me on the matter, I'll just make jokes about it.
Yeah.
Uh, and yes, sometimes it involves making a bunch of UK license jokes because everything is on the table. I hold these truths to be self-evident that all are cremated equal. Uh, but with that in mind, I know you said on the thing that it's going to be around 76 pages. Do you foresee that extending given the current state of it?
Yeah. So at the moment, I think it's at least 80 pages with what I've got. I kind of want to see where funding ends, so I'm going to add in some extra stuff into the book already. I'm going to put in a new playable species, and I want to expand some of the skill roll rules a little bit. Maybe just flesh them out with a little more detail. So that's an extra 4 pages I'm putting in. Um, if I get to the point where I'm going to, it all depends on funding amount. Like, once the crowdfunding ends, I'll look at it. I'll look at the funds I've got. I'll commission some new art, and I'll examine the book. And thankfully, because of just how I'm doing the book, because it's just a PDF and print on demand, it's very easy to add more pages. But I don't want bloat though. So every new spread that I put in needs to be important. Um, yeah. I know that's like a very non-committal answer, but that's why I put the 76 plus or whatever it is I put on there, because I'm like, yeah, it's going to be bigger, but I can't say exact size. Yeah.
Hmm. I can certainly get that, and obviously, once editing comes into the picture, things will always get complicated. But
Hmm.
since you brought up the idea of spacecraft and possibly space combat,
Hmm.
would that operate on a similar skill and specialization setup like you already have with characters, or do you have something else in mind you'd lean into?
Yeah, I've got two loose ideas in mind. I haven't locked it in. Ultimately, I didn't include spacecraft because I just didn't think it quite needed it. But obviously, people might have more options. I'm either gonna go a separate spacecraft character sheet with like much more details,
Mhm.
or more likely, it's probably going to be something maybe something pretty loose, like just. I mean, what do you need on a spaceship? You need the different subsystems, you need weapons, you need sort of, and then for fighting, you need some sort of offense and defense roles. A couple of special effects, like
Well, you're already leaning
uh,
into a module-based design with spacecraft in Fragged, so
oh man, yeah. Now, Fragged Empire, a spacecraft, is effectively a giant NPC that's made by all the players at the table.
mhm.
Like it's kind of a collaborative, constructed NPC with as much complexity as a player character. Almost, not quite.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I'm
I,
saying. The
I
framework is
yeah,
halfway there. Uh,
yeah. So I think that's one way that I could go for Ragtag. I'm not quite locked into that though.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I need to think, okay, you have extra options, but what's added to the game by having distinctions between, like, I don't know,
it would be funny if
laser
this.
turrets and a plasma cannon on your ship and stuff like
Yeah,
that?
it would
Yeah.
be funny if the spacecraft section had a look like it was trying to evoke old school Descent. If only so I can give everybody who played Descent growing up PTSD, because as much as I love that game does not love me back. And Descent's not a bad game; it just hates you. Uh, Although it is a very good advertisement for its successor in Overload, which is still it's still a royal pain, but it's not like I'm getting it's not like I'm getting beaten upside the head about how much the game hates me. There's there's a fine line between bad game design and evil.
Mhm.
Evil game design is when the people know what they're doing is ridiculously hard and they're doing it anyways, or they know just the right moves to make to annoy you or piss you off.
Mhm.
In some cases, that was very much intentional. Like look at say Extreme Rise of the Triad, where they outright said we wanted to find as many ways we could piss the players off with the level design. Uh, to which I say mission accomplished, I guess. But I digress. Now, with that in mind, as far as the PDF version, what would you be shooting for as far as a release window?
Actually, I mean, okay, so if I decide to include spaceships, that's a massive section in the book. Like, that's at least
Yeah,
8 more pages,
I
if
was
not
gonna
more.
say I
Like,
was gonna say 10.
I was gonna say, you could double the size of the book if you put spacecraft in there. Because at the moment, what do you mean? So let's assume none of that sort of addition. Um, I could probably okay. So we finished the crowdfunding in 17 days. It takes about a month for funds to come through. Let's say 2 weeks to sort of polish up, chase people down. Make sure all my files and backer data is in order, and then send out.
Hmm.
Like like the game is basically already done. I'm just playtesting at the moment, and as I will playtest right up until the point where I click publish, because that's how that works. Like constantly looking to improve things and polish things. Yeah. I am commissioning some extra art, but that should be done within that window because I'm jumping on that right away. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a month and a couple of weeks after my crowdfunding finishes. So what's that, like that bit over 2 months from now?
Yeah,
Yep.
I could certainly see it.
Yep.
With that said, I do want to sincerely thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come all the way to my temple and enjoy the madness that happens around here.
Always lovely to talk to you, Mildra.
Mm-hmm. And anytime you see fit to return, the door is always open. As I often say around here, drinking is not mandatory, but it is encouraged. And, of course, a sincere thanks goes out to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to come onto the show and enjoy the madness. And there will be plenty more where that came from, as there always is here, on the open bar of the internet. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
Could